Last episode, God walked through the covenant ceremony alone and sealed a promise to Abram that did not depend on human performance. But the promise still had not arrived, and Sarai was tired of waiting. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, "Behold now, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." Notice how Sarai frames this. The Lord has prevented me from bearing children. She is not wrong that the situation involves God. She is wrong about what to do with that conclusion. Her logic goes like this: God has not delivered on the promise the way I expected. Therefore, I will help him do it a different way. It sounds almost reasonable from the outside. But what she is actually doing is taking the fulfillment of God's promise into her own hands, which is one of the most consistently painful things any person does throughout the entire Bible. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. 4 words that carry enormous weight. This is the same pattern we saw in Genesis 3. Eve offered the fruit to Adam and he ate. Now Sarai offers a solution to Abram and he accepts it without question. Both men had heard directly from God about his plan. Both men, in a moment of pressure, deferred to human logic instead. So, after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram her husband as a wife. And he went in to Hagar, and she conceived. 10 years. Abram and Sarai had been waiting for the promised child for 10 years. A decade of faith, of following God, of living in tents in an unfamiliar land, of holding on to a promise that had not yet arrived. 10 years is a long time to wait for anything. And in the 10th year, the weight of waiting became heavier than the willingness to trust. What this means for you today. Think about the thing you have been waiting on God for. A relationship, a child, a financial breakthrough, a healing, a door that keeps staying closed despite every prayer you have prayed. Now think about the moment you started considering alternatives. Not because the alternatives were wrong in themselves, but because the waiting had stretched long enough that helping God along began to feel like wisdom instead of impatience. In 2026, we are surrounded by tools, strategies, and options for solving almost every problem ourselves. The cultural message is consistent. If something is not happening, do something about it. Take control. Make it work. Sarai was not a faithless woman. She had followed her husband out of everything familiar because she believed in the God he followed. But even faithful people, after long enough seasons of waiting, start designing their own solutions to problems God has already promised to solve. The question this chapter asks is simple but uncomfortable. Where in your life right now are you trying to help God keep a promise he has not asked for your help with? And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." The solution Sarai designed created an immediate problem she had not anticipated. Hagar conceived, and the dynamic between the two women shattered. This is what happens with solutions we engineer around God's timing. They rarely solve the problem they were designed to solve. They usually create a new set of complications that the original problem never would have caused. Abram, who just a chapter ago showed courage in rescuing Lot and wisdom in refusing the king of Sodom's offer, now completely abdicates responsibility. He tells Sarai to do with Hagar whatever she thinks is best, and Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, and he said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She said, "I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her." This is a difficult instruction to read. God is telling a woman who has been mistreated to go back. But then he does something extraordinary. He sees her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, "I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. Behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction." So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. "You are a God who sees me. You are a God who sees me. El Roi, the God who sees." This is one of the most tender moments in Genesis. In the middle of a situation that Sarai created, that Abram passively allowed, and that Hagar had no choice in, God meets the woman who had the least power in the entire story. He does not ignore the consequences of human impatience. He enters into them and finds the person most affected. Hagar was not the one who tried to help God keep his promise. She was the one caught in the consequences of other people's impatience. And God still saw her, named her son, promised her a future. Here is what this chapter leaves us with. Human impatience created a situation that was never God's design, but God's mercy was large enough to enter that situation and bring something redemptive even out of the thing that should never have happened. That is not permission to engineer our own solutions. It is proof that even when we do, God does not abandon the people caught in the consequences. Is there something in your life right now that you are starting to suspect was your Ishmael? A solution you designed yourself because the waiting became too heavy? God, I confess the places where I have tried to help you keep promises that were never mine to fulfill. Show me the difference between the steps you are asking me to take and the solutions I am designing out of impatience. And for anyone caught in the consequences of someone else's impatience, be El Roy for them today. Be the God who sees them. Amen. Tell me your answer in the comments, and tell me where in the world you are watching from today. Next episode, Genesis 17. God changes Abram's name, and then gives him an instruction that seems impossible at 99 years old, and asks him to do something that will mark his body for the rest of his life as a sign of the covenant.